the MTP study found. So the industry can't spin it anymore like, oh, well, more research is needed. We know that we need to be protecting ourselves and our kids yesterday. Yes?
So that study came out and the FCC is still saying what it's saying.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
But there's good news on that front, too. So Senator Richard Blumenthal was, you know, right? He was the Attorney General in Connecticut for 20 years. So he knows the system very well. He is calling out the FCC. There's a Commissioner, Brendan Carr, who has just joined the FCC in the last year. By the way, I understand that it was Brendan Carr, who was the industry lawyer back in San Francisco, was trying to warn the public a decade ago. He's now one of our FCC commissioners. The current FCC chairman is a former senior lawyer of Verizon. So Harvard put out an excellent report called Captured Agency that is also out on my website, but it's free. And this was the missing piece for me because I kept thinking, surely if this is as bad as my research is telling me it is, doesn't somebody have our backs? And that's when I learned that most of our federal agencies are run by the industries they presumably regulate. So that really got me. So I thought, okay, well, if they're not going to do something, what can I do, right? So here we are. Thanks for coming today. But Senator Richard Blumenthal called out the FCC in December. This Brendan Carr commissioner with the FCC was in South Dakota, and somebody questioned the safety of 5G, and he said, oh yeah, it's safe. Well, in December, Senator Richard Blumenthal and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo out of California wrote a formal letter to the FCC and Brendan Carr and said, please provide us with the research upon which you base the claims of safety. We would like that by December 17th. They never responded. So Anna Eshoo introduced a bill in January to restore local control in deployment of 5G because the industry's plan is to take away local control so our cities and towns can't say if or where they want any of this technology. They want to streamline, get rid of the permitting process, no public input, and you're just going to wake up tomorrow with a cell tower outside your bedroom. So she's putting in federal legislation to try and preempt that.
in Massachusetts.
No, federal. Federal. And there's a... Yeah, the industry's been very effective at getting in at the state level, but that means you just gotta fight harder, right? So then just a couple of weeks ago, there was a hearing, it might have been the Commerce Committee, and it had the industry folks at the table, and Senator Richard Blumenthal said, have you done the research to prove that this is safe? And one by one, these poor industry guys were like, oh, well, no, actually, we're not actually. We don't know of any studies that are going on right now. So Blumenthal has been terrific. He's put out a couple of press releases. He's done some press conference around this. And there are some really good people, good environmentalists working with him on stuff like this. So we're not dead in the water just yet. That's the first time anybody at the federal level has called out the industry. So that bodes really well. But we've got to be vigilant inside our own towns and neighborhoods because we're the ones who have to live with this. And back in 2016, when the National Toxicology Program put out their first segment of findings and it looked pretty bad, they tried to tell the FCC, they tried to tell the FDA that commissioned the study, and they tried to tell the public, but once again, you and I never heard about it in the mainstream media. And within 3 weeks of getting that information, Tom Wheeler, who was in that film as the former FCC chairman, within 3 weeks of getting that information on its toxicity, turned around and got approval for 5G spectrum. And Tom Wheeler was the head of the Industry Association. He was the chair of the CTIA back in the 90s when the first oncologist said, my patient died of these unusual brain tumors on the side of her head and they happened to line up with the antennas in her cell phone. That got on Larry King Live and it became a PR nightmare overnight for the industry. Stock prices started dropping. So as Dr. George Carlos said, he was put in place to do the studies by the industry. 200 scientists, and a couple of years later, he came back and said, yeah, that likely did kill that woman, and by the way, children are especially vulnerable. And what they do, they buried him. And they got the telecom act in place. So, yeah.
How do you turn your wireless off at night?
The question is, how do you turn your wireless off at night at home? That's an excellent question, because I had no clue about this. In fact, I circled my tail for about 3 months going, well, we paid good money for all this stuff. But what I ultimately did is you can put your router on a timer, and it will shut itself off at night. My husband had bought a booster, extra router, so that we could get signal on the far end of the house. So I work from home, so I just go in and unplug stuff, right? And my kids would come home, Mom, did you turn off the Wi-Fi again? And I was like, yeah, I did. Well, I don't have it anymore. My first steps, and I had nobody I could talk to about this back in 2013. Not one single person in my town had ever heard of it, not one single person in my schools, not our librarian, not our selectman, not our health agent. Zip. So it was just me trying to process what I was learning. So ultimately, I got rid of all those decked cordless phones because that's like having your own cell tower. I rewired my keyboard, my mouse, my printer, and then you just go in and you just turn all those antennas off. For my router, once I had hardwired everything else with an Ethernet cable, I called up my internet service provider and said, I choose hardwired, but my radiation detection meter is showing me that there's an awful lot of radiation coming out of that triple play box that's installed in my home from my internet service provider. So he said, oh yeah, sit down at your computer. So I sat down at my computer and they talked me through. They just said, okay, here's how you get into your account. Click on the wireless settings. And when I did, I saw there was a 2.4 gigahertz antenna in my house and a 5 gigahertz antenna. So I just clicked off, apply, and after a few seconds, they said, you realize you're cutting everybody's Wi-Fi off? And I said, yes, thank you. And then I went downstairs to my utility closet where our router is, and I measured. And it was out of the red and the yellow zone, and it was way back down to green again. So
you're measuring inside this room right now?
yeah, I'm measuring inside this room right now, and this building has wireless, and some of us might still have devices that are on and transmitting.
Outfitted itself in 5G.
And there's everything coming in from outside.
Yeah.
So, a couple of community things that I've been able to achieve in Ashland.
How much is that?
This device, this is the Acoustic Meter, RF meter model AM10, and I got it for about $350, $400. There are others. He's got the Acousticom 2.
The budget, that's about $200.
Yeah.
Acousticom 2, probably less EMF.
Where?
Less EMF.
Oh, less.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
And there are other sites too. Yep.
Yeah, and there are other meters and stuff out there. I've just heard from Dr. Andrew Krause up in Canada that they are now developing a 5G meter because that goes into a whole different range of radio frequency bandwidth. So you just have to take charge and decide for yourself what you want to do. Maybe tonight you go home and turn everything on, and you might find out that you slept through the night for the first time in ages. The kids might have far less behavioral and social and emotional issues because it's not jacking their nervous system all day and night. Question?
I check the small stuff with my kids. I have these little stickers that are from a website that is radiation EMF neutralizers. I put them on every device I could wear around the house to start. But they're supposed to at least either mediate or release or lessen.
Yeah, I personally haven't used many of the products myself. There's a couple things you need to be careful of. Sometimes if you use a shielding product, that's just going to throw that radiation off to somebody else. And if it's secondhand smoke, but now it's secondhand radiation. So you want to be careful with that. Everybody is very individual. I've seen somebody who does muscle testing test people using some of the shielding products. For some people it works, for some people that particular one didn't work and it made them react more strongly. So just be very careful with any kind of product because you may be the one person that it doesn't work for and maybe it makes your situation worse. So, yes.
I turn off my cell function. What's the difference between going to airplane mode and just turning off the cell?
You just gotta look and see how many antennas you have. Sometimes airplane mode will automatically disable the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the cellular, the data, the locator, the hotspot. But every device is different, so the bottom line is you want to make sure that you have no radio frequency antennas still left on. Okay. Sir, did you have a question earlier? Oh, never mind. Yes.
You mentioned that you had read a book.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend that to everybody?
The book that my girlfriend read
Yes.
was Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman.
I have a copy, but I was hoping
Yeah.
you'd bring it up again.
And there are a number of other books that I brought with me for parents whose children are already showing signs of digital addiction. And you kind of know it when you take their device away and they blow it. Like they go into a fit of rage or they scream or they cry or they can't function without it. You know you've got some pretty serious issues happening. Dr. Victoria Dunkley has written an excellent book called Reset Your Child's Brain. And you basically go on a digital detox, and in the first week you educate everybody around your child of what you're doing. And as intimidating as it sounds to unplug your kid, everybody feels so much better at the end of this. The kids are their happy selves again. They're able to play, they're able to communicate. You know, it's remarkable how far down the rabbit hole we've fallen with this. And with small steps, there's so much gain to be had. So there's Dr. Victoria Dunkley's book. There's like a little book back there called Wireless Wise Kids. That's by a woman in Australia who used to be a school teacher before she went to work for her government in telecom. And it's like a little scholastic book. So that's an awfully nice way to introduce the conversation. You know, lots of white space, illustrations, tips on how to use technology safely. There's another one by a woman in Massachusetts, Dr. Catherine Steiner-Adair. She takes us through every stage of childhood development and what the impact of this technology is doing to our social and familial structure. Dr. Deborah Davis wrote another book back there called Disconnect. She was the one in the film who said her 9-month-old grandson, what a little smarty pants, he could get on the phone and make it fly. She's one of our world's leading scientists. She was on the Nobel Peace Prize team on climate change, and she thought, surely if there were an issue there, I would know about it. She had no idea. So even the brightest among us simply have never learned the risks. Yes?
Is there a link to Generation Zapped, the film that we can send to like our school district?
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to please sign in on the sign-in sheet. You guys can pass it around if somebody wants to grab it and start circulating it. I'll send you follow-up information tomorrow.
There were a few sheets that's a little confusing. Like which sheet?
On my table to the right, it says that Generation Zapped at the top, and you can just, but please, please, please print very clearly because sometimes things bounce back and I can't get information to you if I can't read your handwriting.
Oh, yeah. Thanks
Yes.
for signing up on your way out. We really appreciate that. So we can get in touch with you and we can make the difference.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as I was saying, I've researched this about 1,000 hours, which is 40 hours a week for half a year, right? I mean, I've put a lot of time on this. And I know people might want to think, well, how can I share this information with other people easily once they find out about it? There's a really terrific TED Talk by a guy named Jeremy Johnson called Wireless Wake Up Call. And it's, I don't know how long it is, 20 minutes or something, or 30
Yeah,
minutes?
15 minutes.
15
Yeah.
minutes.
If you go on my research repository, I've done a page for engineers and physicists because they're often the hardest ones to believe that this is harmful. Jeremy Johnson was, or is an engineer. His wife's a doctor. Smart meters went in, they got wicked sick, right? I've had the privilege of working with some of the world's leading experts on this out of Europe, and together we have built a very simple nonprofit called Wireless Education, and you can get it, wirelesseducation.org. I've got these cards back there. Please take them home. Literally, we distilled it down to a half-hour course. We are ready to train your schools, your towns, your families. There's one for schools and families and one for the corporate workplace, because as Ellie Marks indicated in there, the insurance companies have already recognized this as a leading risk and they are not covering it for insurance. So what does the industry do? When they come in and put all this in, they have you sign a contract at your town saying you're taking on the legal liability for this. Our towns probably have no idea. But there's some really good folks in the environmental world that did the Baby Safe project, and there's a card back there as well. Dr. Hugh Taylor, who runs the Yale OBGYN program for their medical school, he was spearheading the Baby Safe project with the grassroots environmental education. Grassroots environmental education folks have just put up some new websites in the last year. One of them is called Telecom Power Grab. They've got a toolkit page in there where they've done up a sample ordinance that we should be giving to our towns to say, here, they already did the legwork for us. They've culled the best statements to put together an ordinance to start protecting our towns, like don't put this anywhere near a school, don't put it in residential areas. And that, again, is free online, so there's a lot of terrific resources. And if you go to the 5G and internet page on my website, you'll find that there too. Yes?
I was wondering, as a Rhode Island here, do we have a local group that has formed on this? Because I think...
Yeah, Liberty.
Yeah, because we're working alone, and we all go home tonight.
Yeah, if you go on Facebook, Rhode Islanders for Safe Technology, right?
Well, you don't have to, I happen to not be on Facebook
Oh, okay.
myself.
Okay.
But my website, which is on the sheets that you have out there, is the toxicsinfo.org. And we have a safer technology page that we've just put in. And by the way, the leader in all of this is standing right there.
Yay.
God bless him. We're just trying to help out, but we have been, my organization had been mostly dealing with other toxic concerns like pesticides and that kind of thing. But a few years ago, I find it interesting, the Governor's Commission on Disabilities here in Rhode Island, they have these sessions where people can come and speak about their problems and their concerns. And it turned out that there were none of these that certain people could attend because they were affected by the Wi-Fi or the stuff that was in the libraries or in the locations. I was able to contact the head of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, and we did set up a special session just for people who were electrosensitive. So one reason I mentioned this is I think that contacting the Governor's Commission at this point in time might not be a bad idea, and that in some cases we might have some success with talking about accessibility issues for disability. And that's something that I think was most successful in getting after the tobacco industry, is the courts, not necessarily the legislature. So we're looking for the low-hanging fruit.
I heard that it was in North Carolina where they got to pass this for people with disabilities, where they can actually opt out of the smart meters.
Okay.
And they can't charge them for it,
Right.
and they can't penalize them.
And I was going to say that what I've been trying to think, what are the low-hanging fruits? I think that going for being able to opt out of the smart meters at no cost, because they try to charge you for it, or they try to make it complicated, is one thing that people can do.
Right.
And it's something, is really doable, I think, because it's a right. It's talking about a right.
The water company doesn't seem to want to do it no matter what.
Yeah, well,
They're giving me a really...
They don't want to do it, but, I think it is possible. If people,
In Wayland, Massachusetts, they had us come in and we gave a little talk to their commission there, and Wayland actually at town meeting voted not to let the smart meters in for their water. So it can be done, but it took citizens making their commissions aware of it because they had no idea. and then bringing in others who will also speak to you about it. So, you know, you guys have a lot of power. You just have to really be able to speak. Yes.
How can we refuse that? I had a little note on my door today saying that they tried to change my water meter and I wasn't home.
Send them a certified letter. Send them a certified letter and say, I don't want this. Yeah.
That is the only thing in my house that is fitting any sort of radiation, like water, and it keeps me up at night.
They won't change it. They told me that it doesn't, and they said it's safe.
I have that acoustic meter, that $400 acoustic meter. I have my whole house rewired, everything's clean,
Yeah.
except for this stupid water meter.
So you don't have any electrical meter that's smart?
No, we don't have a smart
Yeah.
meter, we're clean, except
Yeah.
for this water meter.
Can't get it turned on, they won't.
Yeah, I haven't been able to do that.
I just want to say two other things. I don't want to take up too much time. But I think that, again, speaking of low-hanging fruit, we're not going to get people to give up their Wi-Fi and their cell phones anytime in the near future. That's not going to happen. I think we can focus on public buildings, especially libraries and schools, where the accessibility issues can really be put forth. But the other thing is at home, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. I have information from the Environmental Working Group, which I have found in other issues to be really, really great. And I wanted to get your opinion on their suggestions here for what you can do to protect yourself from the
Yeah, so the Environmental Working Group had a scientist that was very actively engaged in this a number of years ago. And then she left and took on another role, and now she's just come back recently. So I think we're going to hear a little bit more out of the Environmental Working Group on this. And when this was last activated with them, the cell phones were pretty much the big
blue
thing.
tubes that they were talking about. Are you familiar with those?
Blue tubes?
Yeah, because they investigated, they were looking into ways that you can kind of protect yourself. And as Cece was saying, there's some things that are worse.
Yeah.
You know, that you cover it up and it's worse.
Yeah.
But they were saying that this,
Well,
this is an
Environmental
article that's
Working
under-
Group, you know, good on them for looking into this issue, but I would go instead to something like the Environmental Health Trust. They built an international database on what other countries are already doing. They're out there on the front lines of everything, so Environmental Health Trust, if I had to point to one group, that's where I would go.
This is specifically that they specialize in suggestions for consumers on
Yeah.
different products.
Yeah,
And
and basically, I think what
good
they're,
on that.
yeah, basically hardwire everything you can, turn off the wireless when you can, and work with your towns for safe infrastructure. Yes.
So, I was actually thinking and it's just been really hard to talk to anybody in the schools, you know, in several different school systems. And I think there's just this, we don't want to know. We're all using these devices, we don't want to know. And even in Montessori school, you know, they finally said her husband, the director of the school, her husband is a microwave expert. So he said, well, actually microwaves aren't safe. And they got a microwave in every classroom. So she said, well, we'll just take it out of the preschool classroom. Well, my son is in the elementary school. You know, so she felt that was like she did everything she could. She took it out of the preschool classroom. It just, you know,
It's extremely frustrating. And yeah, I think what you have to do is get a lot of parents educated.
And they don't want to hear it either. You know, they think they're crazy. And I actually thought finally that our board members.
We gotta get going.
Yeah, they're kicking us out.
Thank you so much, Cece.